IB Nation Sports Talk approaching the end of Southern Cal week. Arrow Guy, 173 jumping in, beat SC.
Let me ask you something. Is this game up there for you on the season? Like, I know everyone wants to beat Ohio State, and the chances to go undefeated and make the playoff, those are out the window. Is USC that game where you're just like, they got to win that one every year?
I think especially now, the way this season has been, one, it's your rival. So yes, you've got to beat them every year. And they owned SC for a while. And then of course, both schools changed coaches in the same year. And USC got this offensive guru, and he got his quarterback to follow him over there. And Marcus Freeman, didn't have that advantage in year one. And I guess the long and the short of it is, to answer your question, yeah, you've got it. This is a huge game for Notre Dame, like regardless of rivalry, because of the stature of USC, what they are this year. And for Notre Dame to have any chance to salvage this season and make it not be a complete disappointment, this game becomes a must, I think, this weekend. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a must-win game for Notre Dame, and I think you'll see. I saw what happened last week in terms of how people kind of quickly switch sides on Marcus Freeman, I guess you could say. And if you lose this one,
were you one of them? Were you one of them?
I was too. I still believe in Marcus Freeman as a whole, but I still think he did stuff bad last week.
There's enough questions. I think all the questions are valid right now. I don't think there's any way around that after what we've seen the last couple of weeks with some of the decisions that have been made and just some of the general unorganized chaos out there on the field at times.
Yeah. So again, this is for me must win. And I think you can going 6-2, 4 games left. That's what's crazy. After this game, we're at 4 games left with 2 bye weeks, right? So the season is going to really stretch out. You're not going to have as many games, but I feel really good about the chances of 6-2 with, again, 2 bye weeks coming up and the remaining 4, opponents on the schedule. You're kind of through the gauntlet of the schedule. And I think you need that exclamation point at the end of this tough stretch. And you got to beat one of these teams, right? Like you lost to Ohio State. Your best win is against Duke on the road right now. It would be great to beat a top 10 team at home inside Notre Dame Stadium this Saturday night.
Absolutely right. And even though they lost to Ohio State in their last home game, Sam Hartman has played better at home this season. So maybe that kind of gets him going. The offense in general has been better. We'll see if that gets him going this weekend. There's all
I got to say is
I knew it was, I knew, Salty, as soon as I said it, that you might be one to jump on that unorganized chaos, as if there's any other kind of, there can be organized chaos, right?
Yeah, I think there can be organized chaos for sure.
Especially when you're talking football, I think that you could make the case that a really good swarming defense is actual organized chaos.
Yeah, I could get on board with that.
Yeah.
All I got to say is I'm pumped up for USC week. I have a ton of stuff to kind of get through today. Going to hit defensively, going to hit USC, going to hit offensively, stuff to do against USC. There's a lot of good material to get in today, and I'm really fired up. I'm running on fumes. I got home at like 8 in the morning off a red-eye flight from California, but I'm still pumped up. I'm excited for USC. This is like, as a kid, this was my favorite game of the year. I would always try to find tickets to this game. My best friend and one of my best friends and I, we would go scalp out, when people were still selling like hard tickets before the game. Like, I always wanted to beat USC. Like, even if the season was considered, and I'm not saying this is going to happen this year, but I feel better about a team going 8-4 and beating USC, or a 9-3 going, beating USC. That's how much the game matters to me. So I'm really looking forward to this one.
You were at the Bush Push game, weren't you?
Yeah, I was at the Bush Push game.
That's what I thought. I thought I remember that right. All right, so we will get it is Thursday, and that means Whiteboard Day. It says it in the title of the show, so it's kind of self-explanatory. But some Thoughts from Marcus Freeman first. He did his noon Zoom earlier today. Final comments from the Fighting Irish head coach before the game Saturday. We've seen all 5 running backs this year. Audric Estime, of course, continues to be the workhorse. Jeremiyah Love steadily getting the next most reps over the last few games, especially. And Marcus Freeman was asked today, like, is that going to continue? Is it going to kind of be maybe a little bit more 1-2 punch there with Love and Estime?
I think you've seen an increase in Jeremiyah's carries production in the past few games. He's continuously getting better. Audric is Audric. We got to continue to, give the ball to Audric and protect him and making sure that we open up some run lanes for him. But we still feel comfortable with Jadarian and Jabron and even Devin Ford coming in the game in their specific roles. And so we know as the season goes on, as I said weeks ago, you can't continuously play 5 guys equally, and that's what you've seen is that Audric and Jeremiyah have taken probably the majority of the load with Jadarian being third. And so I think you'll see a similar type mindset as we go into this game. There's certain packages for certain guys, but we're going to continuously make sure that Audric Estime and Jeremiyah Love have a chance to do some things with the balls in their hands as well as Jadarian Price.
So what do you think, Jess? Would you like to see even more of Jeremiyah Love and maybe less of the other 3 not named Audric Estime going forward?
Yeah, I on Tuesday's show, I made a point to kind of look at Jeremiyah Love's production because I feel like a lot of people have noticed that he provides a lot of bursts out of the backfield, and he's a nice complementary back to Audric Estime. And I would argue that Jeremiyah Love should see even more touches than he's getting now. So I don't know if that eats into a little bit of Audric's and takes away from the rest of them. But, I mean, against Louisville, Audric Estime touched the ball 7 to 8 times, and he averaged 7.5, per if that was a rush or if he was catching a screen out of the backfield. Just him touching the ball was generating on average 7.5 yards. I think that's a guy that you have to continue to use more. And so, I think that he should be taking away some of that volume from the remaining backs. And I think he should also be taking away a little bit of volume from Audric Estime, and his overall volume should just be up in general. So, I do think that he should be taking away some volume from these other backs.
The 2-back package, haven't seen as much of that the last couple of games, but the 2-back package has predominantly been Jeremiyah Love and Devin Ford. We don't see Audric Estime in that. Would you like to see a way? Would it be beneficial? I think it would anyway, to have Estime and Love on the field at the same time, whether it's 21, 22, whatever.
You're taking away from some of my surprises
okay.
that I have later.
Okay. All right.
So
Didn't mean to spoil the whiteboard. All right.
I told you there's a lot of stuff today. You wouldn't have known about that. So I'll give you a little bit of pass.
I have no idea what's coming up in the whiteboard. There's like one little thing that I kind of think might be coming up. But other than that, I don't know what's coming up in the whiteboard. All right. So we will save that. How about the guards? We saw the guard rotation last week. Is that going to continue?
The rotation of the guards will be is at times their play dictates. Last week, obviously, with Cougs not being able to practice for a day and a half of preparation, went into the thought of rotating guards. But I feel like everybody's had a good week of preparation. We'll go into the game, plan to use in the normal starting 5. But again, play time at times dictates, put guys in the game. If we don't play to the standard that we believe our offense or anybody on our team should, then you have to be able to put guys in the game that you feel can do their job. And so I don't ever want our guys playing fearless, like playing with fear of being taken out of the game. But we also have to make sure that our guys that are in the game are executing.
He dropped something in there that I don't think we heard last Saturday or Monday in terms of this guard rotation. What he said was Pat Coogan was not able to practice all last week. And so that kind of started this. So that's I think, a new development. I don't remember. Again, I don't remember hearing that. What, like, He's basically saying if you're doing your job, you're going to stay out there on the field and you won't necessarily be subbed out on the offensive line. But he's obviously not ruling out that we could see more of it this week.
So I think ultimately, what was the big deciding factor last week was Coogan was hurt, and then Blake Fisher suffered some sort of hand injury, in the game as well. And then that led to some shuffling amongst the offensive linemen. And I think what Marcus Freeman was trying to do in this particular, soundbite is just to clarify that he's not just rotating offensive linemen for the sake of rotating offensive linemen. He's either doing it because guys are hurt or you're playing so bad that you've become a liability to this team. He's not just going to start running out different offensive linemen for the fun of it, essentially. And I don't mind that at the end of the day. I think those are, perfectly fine scenarios in order to rotate offensive linemen out. I just don't like when you start rotating guys for no reason, or you think it's going to provide a spark, or, maybe you're not doing hot. You just got to stick with those guys. There's a reason they've gotten you this far. That's just kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, Jeremy said he heard they had to back off practices last week because the team was gassed. Any truth to that? I mean, I don't know about necessarily gas. He did talk early in the week about with the GPS numbers they have and stuff like that, sort of knowing, like rearranging kind of like what they did in some different team periods and things like that, so that was definitely factored in. We're going to get more into the whole 8 games to start the season and that conversation and IB countdown to kickoff this weekend. Then that, of course, the YouTube video drops Friday nights and the audio podcast drops Saturday mornings before the game. So even though this will be our last IB countdown to kickoff of the week, we've got, or not IB countdown to kickoff, IB Nation Sports Talk, we've got countdown to kickoff coming up this weekend. Another comment, though, from Jeremy. Can we just keep the same personnel in the game for more than one snap at a time? How do these coaches expect anyone to get the feel of the game? And he was talking more. This is, when we were talking about the running backs and, some more skill position stuff a minute ago. It's one thing to have, to sort of be multiple and have these different packages and things like that you can run in and out. I don't disagree with what he's saying, that like, the wide receivers, it seems like, spend as much time running on and off the field as they do running plays at some points, and especially when you're depleted a little bit at wide receiver. Keep the same guys on the field and just kind of shuttle them around in terms of what your formation looks like. I don't think you've necessarily got to shuttle personnel on and off the field all the time. I think that there's something to that. Let them get in a little bit of a rhythm and get going. What do you think?
Yeah, I think rather, especially early on in the game when you're going a little bit more scripted, I would be in favor of that as well, kind of isolating what guys you want to kind of predominantly fold into the mix offensively, and then, rotating them into different kind of personnel packages. Like you see, for example, them split out Mitchell Evans, Holden Stays kind of out as like a, outside wide receiver, I guess you could say, or like a slot wide receiver. And then rather than subbing out, why not leave him in? And then you can bring him in down tight if you want into like 11 personnel or, depending on what you have, there's multiple ways to use people rather than subbing out. Like, don't get me wrong, guys are going to need blows, but you just got to be I agree overall with the concept of you got to let guys get into a rhythm before you take them out type situation, right? I just think that Notre Dame needs to be a little bit better about when they're deciding when and when to not sub guys in and out, right? Like there's just got to be a better feel of, okay, this guy is, averaging 6-7 yards per carry right now. Why don't we ride that out a little bit and see, how long we can get that, how long we can really push that before we need to bring in maybe Love or Estime or someone else.
Final thought from Marcus Freeman before we move on to the whiteboard tonight. Midterms this week, the old dreaded midterms.
As I told them on Monday, like this is every week at Notre Dame is challenging, right? And that's what they do, right? And I know we had midterms this week, but it goes back to preparation for your midterms and going and doing a good job. And so, as I told them, we won't look to make any excuses. We embrace the challenge of the academic rigors of Notre Dame, and it's what makes this place so special. And so our guys have done a great job. They got to prioritize getting rest, prioritize, no wasted time. And I think they've done a really good job.
You were a student athlete in college, Jess. Did the finals, did the midterms, all that kind of stuff, did it have impact on you / teammates, that kind of thing? Not as rigorous maybe as Notre Dame, but private school nonetheless.
not as rigorous as Notre Dame. So I think there's a couple things that benefit Notre Dame. These players specifically is, compared to the regular student body, their in season semester workload is not quite as heavy. They take a lot of summer classes, and they make sure to load up these semesters outside of when they're playing football. So in terms of academic rigor, this is easily the easiest semester that the football players have, right? Like instead of having 4 finals compared to other students, 4 or 5 finals, they probably realistically only have, 2, maybe 3. And so it's definitely, is it an added stressor? Sure, because, it is USC week and you're preparing for a big game. And obviously your mind is going elsewhere when you have academics to worry about, but it's not like it's not anticipated. Like it's stuff that's happened before. It's just managing your time a little bit better. I think at the end of the day, because like everyone's got that like cocktail of, okay, football, study, and free time fun. But when you have the studying, when you need to ramp up the studying and football staying the same, you just can't have as much free time fun, right? Like it's just mainly football, school, go to sleep, and do it all over the next day. It's just there's less kind of free time or personal time, I think, at the end of the day. And it's just a little bit more stressful, obviously, because the schoolwork it has a higher degree of importance to it, right? Because like midterms are a bigger chunk of your grade at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think there's something to it. Like when I used to do Notre Dame baseball, when Paul Maneri was here, just hearing him like always talk about the mental strain. And like you talk to former football players as well, former baseball, whatever sport that they happen to be, they'll tell you that there is something to it because of the extra burden that you have when you're in season and you're also focusing on exams, that there is a definite mental fatigue that comes with it. But as Marcus Freeman said, it's like there's not much you can do about it. It's just kind of it always seems to fall around this time because this is every other year. This is when USC comes to town, and that's always when midterms seem to be. So there's not much you can do about it. They'll be on fall break next week, and there'll be a bye week as well. So they'll, it's like they'll have time when it's time. For now, you got to get your stuff done and take care of some football. That's all there is to it. All right, I'm going to save a couple of the other questions. I saw the Sam Hartman question that popped up from Joe. We will we'll address that in rapid fire because I want to get into the whiteboard right now, as John says. Whiteboard Thursday. It's here. So what have you got for us, Jess? It sounds like it's pretty stacked up and it's ready to go. What are you bringing in the whiteboard today?
Yeah, so the first aspect, there's going to be looking, both sides of the ball, defense, offense. I think I'd like to start defensively. So this is assuming, USC is on offense. I'm going to mix in a little bit from a look that Notre Dame got into versus Louisville last week and just kind of explain how those kind of reads can't happen against a team like USC.
Okay.
And then more so focusing on to, what Notre Dame needs to do to limit Caleb Williams. And I say limit because I don't think Notre Dame needs to get caught up in the Caleb Williams, like end all be all, right? Like you can't just focus in on Caleb Williams too much. I think that you have to look at it more of a bigger picture and figure out ways you can affect Caleb Williams. I think everyone gets caught up of getting him down to the ground, not letting him scramble around, and then kind of everything else breaks down behind it. So I'm looking at, ways to affect him without like completely submerging yourself into Caleb Williams, right? Because there's still 10 other players.
Let's talk more whiteboard. Let's go.
Whoa.
Let's go. Come on.
All right.
Come on.
So there was a look last week against Louisville where they broke off a 45-yard run, and I have a still shot of it right here that I want to share first.
Okay.
Just to paint the picture so everyone can see it, and then I'll get more into the whiteboard aspect of it. So this was what ends up happening here is Louisville just runs basically a lead zone to the field side here, and they score a touchdown. And there was amongst Twitter kind of a conversation about how this play needed to be fitted and whose overall kind of responsibility it was that this touchdown was led up. And I guess why I'm bringing this up is because Notre Dame's going to get into a look like this against USC. And while USC is known for passing the ball, they can't pass the ball every play. And you can't give up the big runs to USC, or it's only going to make their offensive attack more potent. And I think that's what Notre Dame got into last year, is they got too concerned about the pass game, and really the run game gouged them against USC. And I think ultimately is what beat them. And so this is, again, the importance to me of why you have to kind of make sure you're fitting everything. So the big debate here is the inside defensive linemen are all going to slant to the boundary on this play. And really the guy that is responsible for this play is Kaiser and Maris. So let me get to a different screen real quick. So this is same version of it, just on the whiteboard. And so if we're identifying Kaiser, he's the end man on the line of scrimmage. And you kind of can see that I've drawn in some arrows here a little bit of where everyone's slanting defensively and how the offensive line is also kind of, picking up these blocks. So the main thing that you want to look at in this set, and I think I've said this before, is you want to look at the up back on offense, because he's going to lead you, I would say 90% of the time, where the play is going to go. As a linebacker, this is the guy you want to read. He's going to take you to the play. And so, again, immediately, Notre Dame's defensive line is all slanting to the boundary. And there were people who were saying that Jack Kaiser also needed to slant towards the boundary. But that's simply just not true. Jack Kaiser's job is to set the edge here, and I'll show you why. Because when this play develops, this lead back is going to take on Kaiser as he's setting the edge. And Kaiser has two choices. Does he take this man on the outside and set the edge, take on half of his body and leave his outside arm free? Or does he take this block on the inside and allow the play to overflow to the outside? As I was saying, as a linebacker in this set, you're reading specifically this guy. And so Maris is the other guy that is comboing this lead back with Jack Kaiser. And so how this play should ultimately work is this guy is leading up through the hole. Jack Kaiser should take on his outside, and Maris Leofau should be scraping over the top and filling the inside. And they should just be comboing this block. So whoever this guy ends up deciding to block, the other guy should be making the tackle, essentially. And Jack Kaiser is here to set the edge. And if this running back wants to bounce out even more to the outside, well, then you have some of these, corners down here that are going to help you out. But the reason why Jack Kaiser can't take this play on the inside is because then that makes Maris Leofau scrape over the top even longer. He's now got to get to the outside. So what's a shorter route for Maris Leofau in this situation? It's the inside. And so that's why Jack Kaiser has to take on this lead block.
Kaiser's got to set the edge on the outside to force the running back to the inside of that hole. That's exactly what he does. But the problem is there's no Maris Leofau scraping over the top to step into that hole and stop him.
Yeah, and so that was the final part of the argument, is that there was a claim that Maris Leofau could never make this read in time quick enough, and Jalen Sneed could never make this read quick enough in time. And that's just simply not true, because if you're keying in on your guy right here and you immediately see him here, Maris Leofau sees that, and rather than getting depth towards the hole, Maris just keeps going laterally as the running back has already gained 4 or 5 yards towards the line of scrimmage, and now he's just too far back. But if he immediately crashes this hole and trusts his eyes and gets to this read, it's a really the running back might gain a yard or two, but he's not gashing you for a 45-yard touchdown.
That's right. Because if the opposite happens, if Kaiser takes the inside, the cornerbacks are being run off by the wide receivers. There's all the running back has to do is just bounce it outside. It's Kaiser's job to force him inside into the traffic. That's exactly what he does. But again, Leofau is late getting over there, and that's what it comes down
and that's
to.
the unfortunate part about Maris, man, is he and that's, I get it. No football player is perfect, right? You're not going to make a perfect read every time, but it seems like when Maris kind of slips up, his are like the most important ones of the game type situations. And so he is more than capable of making this play. He just needs to trust his read and go immediately. And like I said, he's going laterally and he's stuttering. He has all the time to get there. He just doesn't act on his instincts quick enough.
Yeah. All right.
So that was, again, kind of preluding that can't happen against USC. You got to shut down their run game, because if their run game's going, it's only going to make that pass game more
and that's
potent.
what happened last year. Of course, Al Golden came out with that 3-man front last year and decided to play coverage. And Marcus Freeman kind of talked about that today, that, you can't just sit back and play coverage. You've got to be able to shut down the run and be a lot more aggressive than they were last year. All right. So what have you got here?
Yeah. So the next main thing that I want to get into is what is Notre Dame doing to affect Caleb Williams? And I started to talk about it a little bit. Caleb, your main focus can't be, we need to get Caleb Williams down at all costs. You just can't really allow him to extend plays. And the way that you're going to do that, to me, is you got to play games amongst the defensive line. Because I went back and I watched film on, basically since Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams have been at USC, I think there's been 2 instances where defenses have quote unquote shut down Caleb Williams, or maybe done enough in order for USC to be vulnerable. One of those matchups was last year against Oregon State. It was like a 17-14 game that USC barely snuck out. It was like the 4th, 5th game of the season. I watched a lot of that tape. And then I watched their game against Utah, where Utah beat them. And that game was a little bit, you had to take with a grain of salt, because I don't know if people remember, but Caleb Williams suffered some sort of, I wouldn't call it injury, but he wasn't 100% during the game. And so that, that was also limiting for him as well. But the main common denominator that I noticed amongst these teams is they just found ways to get not unblocked guys to the quarterback, but they just found ways to bring stunts and just disrupt Caleb Williams, get in his face, now, make him get that ball out now, make him uncomfortable where he can't sit back there and necessarily get into his reads like he would want to. So, Notre Dame does this a lot, where they'll bring up, guys to the line of scrimmage, and you don't know who's coming and who's going to drop out into coverage. And I think this has to be very effective against Caleb Williams, because when you bring up all these guys, you're confusing him and what kind of pressure you're bringing, and 2, you're confusing him on what kind of coverage you're going to drop out to behind it. And so, you can't get into playing all your, defensive linemen and linebackers on the line of scrimmage every time. But for this variation, again, what I like about this is, and we saw this against Duke a little bit, right? I talked about this after the game, how Maris Leofau was so impactful because of how he was able to stunt, right? Like maybe Maris Leofau is coming up field as one of these rushers, and then he falls off into like a spy into the middle of the field, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe they bring a stunt where this inside guy is coming out, this, outside guy is coming in, a defensive tackle drops off. And then, whatever stunt you got going on over here, you can get into all kinds of different stunts. But I think what's going to make this effective is you bring everyone up on the line of scrimmage and you confuse him pre-snap of who's coming now and where is the coverage going to be. And I think that's, again, it's not like this is some game-changing thing, but it just slows down Caleb Williams enough, and it confuses the lineman enough that maybe you get a guy free and Caleb Williams has to get the ball out now because a guy is in his face, essentially, right? And so
I was just going to say, this is the kind of stuff that you're talking about, that if Nolan Ziegler is in the kind of shape and is capable enough, just in terms of knowing the defense, knowing his assignments, what he's going to do, he's the kind of athlete who could be really effective in this kind of game plan that you're talking about if he's ready to go.
Yeah, and I think another person that I would look at, and I've had some bias to before, is like someone like Junior Tuihalamaka down here, right? Like as maybe a defensive, like a third down defensive tackle guy, right? Like a guy that's a little bit quicker on his feet, knowing that the pocket could break down and a 3rd and long. Just having more of those kind of, athletic defensive linemen, not your big Howard Cross or, guys like that, or maybe who's the I can't think of his name, Riley Mills potentially down there. Those are guys that you don't want in there in 3rd and long because, again, if the pocket breaks down, you just want guys to be able to keep up with Caleb Williams essentially. So this is one way I look at it. And then I kind of talked about too, like you can't do this all game, right? So if you get into more of Notre Dame's traditional defensive 4-down linemen and kind of the 2 linebackers here on the backside, I still think you can do. And again, what I saw from Oregon State and Utah was, again, just kind of finding ways to bring different kind of pressures, but it's not like you're bringing 5 or 6-man pressure, right? You can still bring a 4-man pressure. Like, say this guy comes off the edge, this linebacker now kind of comes off into the flat. And then maybe this defensive end kicks off into the flat and you bring this linebacker kind of off the edge over here, right? Just different stuff of bringing 4-man pressures. But again, mixing up where you're coming from and who you're dropping off into coverage on the backside. I think that's going to have the strongest impact on Caleb Williams' game, because I don't see it as more so, again, that you need to worry about sacking him or bringing him down. He's going to make plays. Just in the times that you can control it, get the ball out now. Make him uncomfortable.
You want to speed him up,
reads.
Speed him up and make him have to get it out quicker than he wants to. And, but obviously the challenge with that, as Al Golden was talking about him this week, is like each play is 2 acts. The first act is Williams takes the snap, goes through his initial progression. Notre Dame did a great job of coverage last year on that initial progression. But then after that, as the pressure is getting to him, he always finds a way to elude. And it's not just against Notre Dame. We've seen it from him against virtually every team that he has played. He gets away from that initial pressure, keeps his eyes downfield, keeps moving, and just manages to extend plays until finally there is some kind of breakdown in coverage and he gets the pass off, and more times than not, it's complete. That's the biggest challenge of Caleb Williams, is getting that ball out of his hands quicker than he wants it to be out of his hands.
Exactly. And I think that's got to be the name of the game in terms of, defense. Because I think, Notre Dame's secondary is fine. They played against one of the best wide receiver corps in the country. While this quarterback is going to be more talented, he's going to extend the play longer. So you're going to have to be in coverage probably a little bit longer. I'm not worried more so about Notre Dame's secondary. I'm worried about their front 6. And again, what are they doing to disrupt Caleb Williams' schedule, essentially, at the end of the day?
All right.
So that kind of wraps up, what Notre Dame needs to do defensively against USC. And now this is my fun time. This is where we can get into Notre Dame's offense and talk a little bit here.
Are you going to make Jeff happy here with the 2-back set stuff now?
Yeah, I think so. There's 2 major concepts that I kind of looked at. The first one is, how can we get Chris Tyree and Faison on the field together at the same time? Because that sounds kind of fun to me.
It does to me too.
And using their speed to their ability. And another thing to me is, like, Marcus Freeman has made it not made it a point, but Faison being on scholarship means something, right? Like, you're not bringing him on to scholarship. You're not elevating him from practice squad if you're not going to use him. And so what can we do?
Because you're committing a full scholarship to the guy now.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a big commitment.
That's a large commitment. And so if you're going to do that, what are you going to do to get him into the passing game? What complements him the best? And there's probably multiple answers to this, but to me, a more fun aspect of what you could get into is what I'm about to show here. And okay. I think the thing what I'm going to try to emphasize going against USC's defense is they're primarily a 3-4 defense, but they'll shift down into a 4-2-5 as well. And so if you're Notre Dame, Jared Parker's goal this week is, how can we get them stuck into, between the 3-4 and the 4-2-5? how can you get them stuck formationally, gridlock them formationally, and attack maybe being in a 3-4 when they should be in a 4-2-5 or vice versa, essentially, right? And so this is, if Notre Dame comes out and this kind of look right here, this is 10 personnel, balls on the left hash. You have a 2x2, so 2 wide receivers into the boundary, 2 wide receivers to the field side, quarterbacks in shotgun, and then you have a running back also to the field side with him. This is going to force a team like USC to get into more of a 3-4 look, because it's more of a passing down. They're going to be playing a 3-4, only, committing 3 defensive linemen and more of a passing situation, right? And so what I have right here is basically Faison and Chris Tyree in a double slot look. You have, if you're going to go 2x2, you can have each of them in the slot. And I think what's good about putting them both in the slot is just allow them to use their speed, man. Like, these guys are small, they're shifty, but most importantly, they have some speed. So what kind of concept would you want to get into if you're Notre Dame? I think what you do is kind of like I would describe it as like a cross face replace. So I would ultimately have both of these guys kind of run, fades out towards the sideline here. And then what you're doing is you're impacting the guys that you're crossing face. You're making this defensive back either make a decision of, am I going to go, or is it going to be, more so passed off? And then what I like about that is you can have some of your more bigger body wide receivers on the outside. Like maybe this is Jaden Thomas. And then you have Greathouse on the other side. And a simple route is you just replace the guy that's crossing the face. And so you just kind of like sit down right here, right? And so if you use Chris Tyree's speed to kind of flush out the secondary, you immediately replace him with a bigger bodied kind of wide receiver and immediately set down into like a shorter, more intermediate route. And you force these defensive backs to make a decision, right? Because it's going to be basically they're either going to be in man or they're going to switch off into coverage. And this free safety has to go either way. And so if they want to commit to more of the underneath route, okay, then now you have Chris Tyree or Faison running deep. And then if they want to, be more secure, you could come down into these more shorter intermediate routes underneath.
Let me ask you this, because you said this is 10 personnel and you talked to, like, there is a couple of things. One, the outside receivers have not been as productive. Two, there's lack of depth with the outside receivers, especially because we still don't know if Jaden Greathouse, how close to 100% he is with that hamstring. Marcus Freeman said, last week that he wasn't 100% after the Duke game. So what do you think about like this same look? And it doesn't even have to be this formation, but just in general, because of the lack of depth with the outside receivers. What I was going to say is even 11 personnel, but you're substituting Mitchell Evans on the outside basically for, like either Tobias or Jaden Thomas or whoever it happens to be on the outside. What would you think about that?
Yeah. So I would think about that is I have a slide kind of queued up because that was the next thing I was going to get into is a little bit of 11 personnel. And it's funny because like you said, you have no idea most of the time what I'm going to get into. And you're just like, oh, what if they did 11 personnel? Here we go. I have 11 personnel ready. What I fear with 11 personnel, and I still think it could be effective, is now I think if you bring in an extra tight end on the line of scrimmage, that's when USC would be forced to commit. They couldn't run a 3-4, I don't think, once Notre Dame starts going 11, 12 personnel. So I think that's when you would start to see them shift more into that, 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and then your 5 secondary guys. And this, even though this guy looks like a linebacker, so it looks like a 4-3, really he's just splitting the difference between the end man of the line of scrimmage and the farthest wide receiver, right? So this is still more of like a hybrid, linebacker kind of coverage type player. Mm-hmm. But what's cool about this is same concept, right? It's still kind of like double slots. And I like, again, like if this is, Chris Tyree somewhere over here, and this is Faison over here. What's cool about this is you can get into similar concepts of, washing these guys out deep and then allowing kind of Mitchell Evans to cross face, on a shorter route, like a quick 5-yard out route. And now I'm going to take my chances with Mitchell Evans on, maybe an undersized linebacker and potentially a cornerback, depending on how they, these guys, pass off these pass routes by Notre Dame. But what's so good about it, again, is you have these faster guys kind of, flushing everything out, and you're making these guys make a decision instantly. And if they want to play the deep ball, well, that's fine. I have the security blanket of Mitchell Evans underneath. Okay, you want to take away the short stuff? Well, that's when Notre Dame needs to try to take their chances downfield and hit those home run balls too. So that's just one of the concepts I like. And then another one that I think would be really beneficial with using Faison and Chris Tyree together is you can run them on basically, flood routes underneath. And then it gets really wonky there, because when the two fastest guys potentially are on the field at the same time and they're flooding out the middle of the field, someone's got to make a decision, right? And then you can still mess with, maybe you try to sneak a tight end up the seam while all that's going on and get a mismatch that you like. Or, maybe this guy works a deeper post now too. So you have the two underneath routes, you have your tight end leaking up the seam, and you have your other outside wide receiver running a deep post over the middle of the field. That puts this safety in a bind. Is he going to commit to the tight end, or is he going to help out, on the wide receiver doing a post over the middle? That's going to leave someone one-on-one. The safety can't help both guys at the same time. So ultimately what I'm getting at is with Faison and Chris Tyree's speed, you can flood out a lot of different zones and allow some of these other strong-handed, bigger-bodied, receiving guys that Notre Dame has to make more of those underneath catches. And then if USC wants to start coming up on those, that's when you can start hitting those deep balls to, Faison and Tyree, because they're potentially getting a one-on-one matchup down the field.
All right. I like that. I like that concept. Good concepts. Whether or not it happens, I guess we'll see.
And then I have one more.
But I agree with what you said. You just gave Faison a scholarship and you moved him up, and they do have guys who can play slot. If you're going to do that, especially with the speed that he has and the lack of overall speed that we have seen from the entire unit. Again, I'm not saying that there's no speed out there, but like those are the two fastest guys, really, especially with other guys having hamstring issues right now. Faison and Tyree are the two speed guys, and you've got to find a way, I think, to utilize them together, not necessarily.
Yeah, exactly, because they're best. I think you're going to see their best potential when they're on the field together. And so now, like you said, once you've committed to Faison, what are you doing for Faison's game to allow him to be the most effective? I think that's pairing him with Tyree and seeing what they can do on the field together.
And I mean, you could also line them up next to each other and then really make a safety have to, kind of make a do or die decision. Who am I going with here?
Exactly.
Then, yeah.
So I think that's got to be the fun. And then someone in the chat just mentioned you can put Evans into the slot as well. I think those are the three guys who you just got to, like, this game should be consistently hammering them in the slot with Chris Tyree, Faison, and Evans. I think you can really mess with USC of what you're trying to accomplish out of the slot, right? Are we trying to burn you on this play, or are we trying to get, maybe 3-4 yards underneath more type of play? But I really like those three players in the slot. And so then I got one last thing that's really fun, and this is what you mentioned earlier of two-back personnel. And this just plays into what I think would be so effective for Notre Dame, because what did we talk about last week was a big issue, is it felt like Notre Dame comes to the line of scrimmage, they have one play, and they're running that one play no matter what. Well, if you look at what I have right here, I think Notre Dame could potentially get into like 4 different plays just from this one different formation, and depending on, what Sam Hartman is looking at here. So right now you have ball middle of the field, just a simple 2x2 set. So 2 wide receivers to each side, quarterbacks in shotgun, as well as the running back. So immediately this just looks like kind of what I was just going through, right? Like you might have Faison in the slot here, Tyree in the slot here, and some of those routes that I just got into. But what would be fun to me is if you line up Jeremiyah Love in the slot right here.
Ooh.
And then what ultimately is fun about this is I think you could get in. Man, this segment alone could be like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to try to go one step at a time here.
Okay.
But so say immediately you come out in this set and, you see that USC has 3 down linemen, right? And so you motion Jeremiyah Love quickly into the backfield. And now we're into 22 personnel or 2-back personnel right now immediately. And so what that does is that makes USC have to decide, what are they going to do defensively? Are they going to commit down, shift over, bring a fourth guy down? Because I don't think you can get into having 3 down linemen with a 2-back set, because Notre Dame would ultimately eat that up. But right now, I think you have immediately 2 plays to attack. So like say you get USC stuck in this 3-man front right here, right? And you just motioned Jeremiyah Love into the backfield. Well, why not use big Audric Estime as like a lead blocker out here on the edge, and then you hand the ball off to Jeremiyah Love, and USC is trying to fit 5 guys in the box, potentially with 6 Notre Dame guys and a running back coming at you, right? And so I think this is an easy look where you just get Jeremiyah Love out there, you motion him into the backfield, and then you just get into kind of some lead power with your 2 most dynamic backs on the field at the same time, right? And so, okay, maybe you come out, you motion Jeremiyah Love into the backfield, and for some reason USC is ready for it. They're a strong defensive team. They're ready for this formation. They bring 4 guys down. They kind of shift coverage a little bit. What's so cool about this then is now instead of having the numbers in the run game, you potentially have the numbers in the pass game, right? Because say you fake that look and then you get into an RPO look, and then now you're leaking someone like Jeremiyah Love out of the backfield. You have different guys kind of running routes on the backside here. And again, now you in an RPO potential look, you faked a handoff. You've got a guy, you're forcing a linebacker to make a decision. Is he going to commit to the run? Is he going to step back into the pass? And depending on that, maybe Sam Hartman keeps it at the end of the day. So you've already gotten into now 4 different kind of looks or plays that you can get into off of just one formation, right? And so, and again, it allows you to be dynamic with your 2 best running backs at the same time. And if you're not going to use them in the run game, you can quickly, again, leak them out of the backfield, because Jeremiyah Love is so good about catching those screens and getting what seems like 5-6 yards every time, right? So say everything's bottled up, the security blanket is just dumping it down to Jeremiyah Love into the flats. And I just don't trust that USC is defensively sound to make these decisions all on the fly. Like you can just get, and again, this goes back into getting them crossed up of, do you guys want to play a 3-4 or do you want to play a 4-2-5? And depending on what look is given, I think you have something ready to attack them at the same time, right? Because if they go 3 down linemen, you just run a power run scheme with your 2 running backs. If they get down into a 4-man look, you can easily run like a RPO look and get the ball out quickly. So that was the second play that I would kind of run out of this look. And then if we were to move Jeremiyah Love back over into the slot, what does Notre Dame love to do as well? They love to get into 11, 12 personnel, right? So maybe this is Mitchell Evans out here on the slot, and this is Jeremiyah out here in the slot, and you get into a double motion where you bring Mitchell Evans down to the line of scrimmage, you bring Jeremiyah Love into the backfield. Now what does USC do? They are extremely outnumbered in the box. Now you have 7 guys potentially in the box for Notre Dame, and pre-snap, before anyone's moved on USC side, they only have 6. And so are they going to be able to adjust quickly enough? And then again, you can get into more of those power run schemes out of this, because you have a tight end kind of sealing the edge, and then Audric Estime leading up behind him, and then Jeremiyah Love coming behind him. Or do you get into another RPO look and run some sort of passing concept out of it at the same time. But again, it's just easy formations to get into depending on if you can have that personnel on the field, and it's all pre-snap looks. I just ran 3 different plays just based off of what USC is giving you. So I think potentially finding ways to line up Jeremiyah Love in the slot, motioning him into the backfield, getting into some of that 2-back personnel, maybe bringing down Mitchell Evans if he's in the game, or maybe leaving that wide receiver displaced if it's Chris Tyree, Faison, and then just getting into all different kinds of concepts just out of one formation.
Great stuff. Great stuff. My head is spinning. There's so much stuff, and you've got the chat all wound up about all the possibilities that they have. I guess we'll have to see if we actually see it on Saturday, though. Great prep, great whiteboard, knocked it out of the park. Oh, there went Jesse. He went flying right out of the room when he took his whiteboard out of the room. So we're gonna have to wait here for a second for him to get back. But here he comes.
I exited out of the wrong screen. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. It is time, baby.
Let's do it. Here's a question from Joe to start us off. He asked this a little bit ago. Are the USC and Clemson games make or break for Hartman in the draft?
I actually gave this a lot of thought the other day, and what I was thinking about is, how does Sam Hartman overall feel throughout this process? Because I think a lot of the reason why he came to Notre Dame is, there was questions about what he could do in an offense and getting to the NFL. I don't know if Sam Hartman has really showed a lot of difference from the last kind of 2 years, or his time at Wake Forest. And so I would say that in some of these bigger games or opportunities he's got left, and especially against USC where he can really open up the offense and be dynamic against a bad defense, I would say, that these are potential big games that could have a larger impact on Sam Hartman's stock, because they're going to start looking at film at the end of the season and see how he performed in some of these bigger games. And I think if you can start to show that, you can win these games largely because of your quarterback play, that's only going to help his stock.
I agree that it will. He needs it to at least give himself a boost to show that he can do it against better competition, because while he didn't have a great game against Ohio State, it was at that point probably his worst game, but we have seen worse from him in the couple of weeks since. But at the same time, this is a 6th-year guy, and I think that there is a pretty good book on Sam Hartman for the most part at this point from NFL guys. And maybe he gets invited to the combine. He's generally not regarded as one of the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks who are going to be draft available. I think at the very least, Sam Hartman has kind of accomplished at least the minimal thing that he wanted to accomplish by coming to Notre Dame. And that was by getting multi-millions in NIL money by coming to Notre Dame that he wasn't going to get at Wake Forest. He has made a lot more. It's like, I'm not saying that was his only mission. He definitely wanted to try to improve his NFL stock, but he's also given himself a nice fallback, a nice bank account full of money, full of NIL money by coming to Notre Dame with all these different deals that he's done that he wasn't going to get at Wake Forest. So now if he wants to play, if he wants to play in the NFL, there's still a lot more to accomplish, but even good performances against USC and Clemson are only going to get him so far, because there's still going to be a full body of work to look at. And I think that there is plenty out there already on Sam Hartman. So I think that they can help him, but I don't think it's going to be the end all be all, is what I'm saying. So Marcus Freeman continues to be criticized by some for his casual sideline demeanor. Is this fair or foul, Jesse?
I think it's pretty foul. And I think that Notre Dame has maybe, gotten accustomed to the guy that was before, right? Like it was well known that BK was not gonna, he was not shy about wearing his emotions on the sidelines. And me personally, I actually prefer a coach that is more calm, because as a player, if you see your coach freaking out on the sideline, it kind of adds that like mental kind of hysteria to like potentially what's going on in the situation. Because if your coach is acting like, that it's things are kind of falling apart potentially, or he's overreacting, or, or he's blowing up about this, it doesn't give your players a ton of mental confidence when that is the role model of the entire team. Everyone looks up to him, your offensive coordinators, your defensive coordinators, all your coaches, all your players, training staff, everyone looks up to Marcus Freeman. And so when he's melting down on the sideline, I don't think it does anything to boost the confidence of your players. So I actually prefer a coach who's much more calm. I don't like seeing coaches blow up on the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's crazy about, like, this is the most overanalyzed aspect of Marcus Freeman there is. It is so unimportant compared to making the right decisions in terms of, getting the right personnel on the field, knowing when to call a timeout, when not to call a timeout, X's and O's, actual execution decisions, clock management, all these different things. It is just so overblown. And the fact that we came from Brian Kelly to one extreme, and now you've got Marcus Freeman on the other. I just think the sideline demeanor of the coach is just, especially when it's a calm demeanor, is it's just so, you're only talking about it when things aren't going right. Basically, when things are going right, you don't care about what his demeanor is, and I agree with what you're saying. Like, look at Kyle Shanahan. He doesn't have, some crazy sideline demeanor. Look at the other end of the spectrum, and the guy in Philadelphia, he's a little more nuts, but he also doesn't necessarily just blow up at everything. I think that Marcus Freeman, like, when it's time to let an official have it, or, make his point known, those kind of things, he's there. I mean, why do you want a coach who's just constantly going to be blowing up on everyone? You just had that guy and nobody liked it when he was here. So again, I just think it's the most over-analyzed thing that there is when it comes to Marcus Freeman. And I would much rather have a coach with the calm demeanor, something I didn't always have. Like if you can keep that calm demeanor when all these things around you, are flying in your face, I think that that's nothing but a good thing, because your players do tend to feed off that. And I don't think that like there's as much to, you've got to be, more emotional, and that's going to get your team inspired and fired up and riled up and all those kind of things. I just don't think that it matters that much.
Yeah, I think the only criticism that I would have in these instances is there is sometimes that Marcus Freeman looks maybe a little overwhelmed by situational football. And I think that would be maybe something that fans don't personally like to see, is the discomfort or the slight being overwhelmed of your head coach in these kind of critical or key moments. But again, I would rather have someone be calm.
We're reading into things. I don't know how many times, like, there have been plenty of different times you see, whether it's a game or just whatever it happens to be, like, you read too much into things. Like you might even see, like, players kind of animated going back and forth on the sideline. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And everyone automatically assumes, they hate each other or whatever. It's just, again, there's just too much read into these things that I just don't think matters that much.
Yeah.
Mitchell Evans says Notre Dame does not have an offensive identity crisis. Do you buy or sell that?
I actually am going to sell this just because of the wording of the question. I don't think Notre Dame has an identity crisis on offense. I think they have they have things that they want to accomplish. They know how they want to accomplish them, but
they're just not accomplishing.
They're just how they're accomplishing them, or how they're trying to accomplish them, aka play design or play calling in certain moments. I think that's the more so of an issue. They don't have an identity crisis. Again, they know they want to be a power run team and set the pass up off of that, and eventually, work their way downfield and then kind of downshift towards the end of the game with and lean on that offensive line and Audric Estime. It's just they don't necessarily get from point A to point B efficiently or do so in a successful manner. And that's the issue to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Tim obviously disagrees. And I guess it's sort of how you interpret this question is how you're going to look at this. But I agree with the rationale that you're giving. They at least don't see it as an identity crisis because to them, their identity is being this running physical football team. So like there's no crisis, because like it would be a crisis, I guess, if it's like 1 minute you're doing this and now you're grab bagging and doing that and you're just flip flopping all over the place and you can't figure things out. They know what they want to be, just as Marcus Freeman says, they're just not doing it well enough right now. That's what it is. Like to them, they know what their identity is. They're just not accomplishing it when they go out there on Saturdays, these last 3 games.
Exactly.
Major Payne says he heard Kenny Minchey played Caleb Williams in practice this week. He did, and he really challenged the defense. Good news or bad news?
That's great news. You want to get out those challenging things early in the week in scout team, just so you have more comfortability for, when the game actually comes. And it's such a benefit to the defense because Al Golden can see a breakdown in things and say, oh, maybe this isn't exactly what we should run. And this is kind of how I want to tweak it to counteract stuff that has popped up during practice. So I find this to be having someone like Caleb Minchey being really just a tremendous thing because of what I just talked about. You can tweak your game plan throughout the week depending on what Minchey shows you in practice and how they're attacking your defense.
Yeah. If Kenny Minchey's not challenging them during the week, then how are they going to have any chance at getting the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, who's going to be the number 1 overall pick, next year? How are they going to have any chance of doing anything against him? Kenny Minchey's got to make him make a few mistakes. That's not a bad thing. That's what practice is for. Like you're not supposed to be 100% successful in everything you do in practice when you're going up against something new, because you're not going to be 100% successful out there on Saturday. You're not going to force 8 3-and-outs against USC Saturday night. Caleb Williams is going to make some plays. Kenny Minchey's job is to give the defense the best idea that he can as to what they're going to see Saturday. So I think it's nothing but a good thing that Kenny Minchey has challenged those guys and has done well. Maybe a better challenge than what they had last year when they were seeing the scout team quarterback. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame's a 2.5-point favorite against USC this Saturday.
It is concerning. It is like treading in light water. I'm not going to say it's appropriate because I think it's just like a straight up kind of if it were me, the spread would be even closer. It just something feels eerie about it at the end of the day. And I can kind of see it, right? Because Notre Dame has a better defense than what USC has faced. Hopefully that's how we want to look at it. Mm-hmm. This game is at Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame plays better, much better at home statistically against USC, and just, overall, like they're a really good home football team. And then the weather plays into it at the end of the day too. I think if you're talking about, maybe being cold, obviously kids from California aren't gonna love that, coming from some nice weather into that. And then you throw in some of this rain potentially. I think that favors, Notre Dame too, because they have more of a power running game. And obviously if the ball is slick, it's harder to throw and catch. So does it feel like Notre Dame should be a 2.5-point favorite? Yeah, with everything I just said, but it still feels eerie at the end of the day. And I don't completely trust it.
I mean, I was still shocked. This is kind of like trusting analytics. If you're going to look at, statistically, Notre Dame's got the best defense USC has faced. They do. Statistically, USC is the best offense that Notre Dame has faced. They are. But Notre Dame is a 2.5-point favorite coming off a game where I think, as Tim pointed out, they look completely disjointed against Louisville last week. Again, looking disjointed, and whether or not they think they have their identity are two different things. But that's the biggest question, is can Notre Dame score enough points? Which leads us into this next question. How many points do you think they need to score to beat USC Saturday night?
I wrestled with this number for a long time. I think that 30 is too little, and I think 40 is too much. So I'm landing around the 34 area. I think 34 and above is right. I think 40 is like a no-brainer, right? Like if Notre Dame scores 40, I think they win the game. If Notre Dame scores 30, I don't think it would be quite enough. I think you could still lose like 34-30, 31-30. I think you got to get to 34 and above. That's me.
I agree. I think it's going to have to be in that 34, 35 point range. And even that, look at what USC did last year. Look what they haven't scored fewer than 41 points this season. Now, again, they also haven't played a defense as good as Notre Dame. And statistically, it's, like Notre Dame stacks up. John is picking Notre Dame 34-31. Joe says 35. Tim says 34. I think
we're all everyone's falling in that area.
Yeah, we're in that range. They're going to have to get it back up there once again. I don't know. I just have such an uncomfortable feeling after watching this team the last 2 weeks really struggle to score points. And obviously you can go back to Ohio State. They struggled as well, but Ohio State is
they were much more offensively successful in that game.
Right. They just, couldn't finish some drives, couldn't obviously punch through on a couple of 4th and 1s, that kind of. It's going to be in that mid 30s. It's that 34, 35 point, and that's the minimum. They might even have to score a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I think if you want to go like absolute no doubt, I think if Notre Dame scores 40 or more, they win. Point blank.
If they hold USC to 30 points, do they win?
Yeah, because I think you got to score more than 30 to win this.
Well, you think they've got to, but I think the question is still, can the offense do it? Can they do it?
Yeah.
They should have been. Even with Drew Pine, they should have been more successful against USC than they were last year. But USC played the best defense that they had played all season against Notre Dame.
I think this is a big game for Marcus Freeman and Jared Parker, and they know that, right? They know what's been. No one is oblivious to the noise around them. I don't care what you say; it's always going to find a way to infiltrate. And I think that they know that they got to do something different, because you can't keep doing these same things and expecting a different result. Marcus Freeman literally said it in his press conference. That's insanity, right? And so I truly believe that Jared Parker and Marcus Freeman are going to find ways to just be more dynamic and simply find a way to get their best playmakers the ball on offense. And as long as you do that against this USC defense, who's poor at tackling, who's poor in the secondary, as long as you get the ball to them, like getting the ball into their hands is going to be half the battle, and just allowing them to kind of figure it out after that, because USC is just bad on the back end.
I agree. All right. Whoop. What just happened there? I clicked the wrong button.
Whoa.
Our screen went crazy. So this Bryce Harper stuff in Philadelphia,
love it,
is just nuts. He, of course, was doubled off first base to end game 2 of their series against Atlanta earlier this week. And then a reporter was in the clubhouse. He hears Orlando Arcia relishing in Harper's misfortune in the clubhouse in Atlanta. He gets back to Harper. Harper smashes a couple of home runs last night, helps the Phillies win 10-2, and he stares down Arcia, rounding second. Arcia, of course, the shortstop. Yeah, and he makes the throat slash and the whole thing as he crosses home plate both times. Arcia says that Harper wasn't supposed to hear it. He says, quote, "That's why we were talking in the clubhouse. I thought whatever is said in the clubhouse stays in the clubhouse." End quote. Do you buy or sell this from Arcia?
I buy that from Arcia, actually. And I think it's I think there is major clubhouse, I guess you could say, like etiquette, or like maybe a better way of saying it is like bro code. Like there's a lot of stuff that I played in my playing days in clubhouses that I wouldn't want guys from the other side of the dugout to hear.
There's bro code if it's your teammates, but when there's media in there, you've got to know anything that you say when there's media in the clubhouse is going to be reported on. You can't just be
but I think
running your
that the
mouth.
only thing that really rubs me on that one is that it was a Braves reporter that kind of regurgitated some stuff that Arcia said. It wasn't even a Phillies reporter. So it's like, what is a Braves
But he's a
reporter
reporter.
doing, spilling out Braves kind of, tea,
He's
I guess you
reporting
could
on
say.
the Braves. He is not a member of the Atlanta Braves. There's a difference. There's a big difference.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I just feel like
He's not a Braves cheerleader like the guys on the radio or TV or whatever.
So you're more so saying like Arcia needs to differentiate stuff you say in the dugout, and stuff that you say when in the clubhouse after the game when more people are around.
Post game in the clubhouse, when they open the doors to the media at some point, and there's media, like in baseball, reporters go right up to guys' locker rooms with microphones and cameras and whatever it happens to be. So like there's post game everywhere, and like in college, you don't see it until you get to the bowl games. Like at the bowl games, it's the same deal. It's not as regimented like as a Notre Dame home game where you're having official press conferences and all that stuff. Like the NFL, same deal. That you'll have your press conferences, but they open up the locker rooms to the media. Once they open up those doors and they let the media in, anything is up for grabs. Like you want to say something to your teammates, that's one thing, but once the media is in there, it's not up to the media to keep your secrets for you. Anything is up for grabs that gets said when they're in there.
Yeah, it's just poor. It's poor on Arcia's part because, and to me, the funny part is like just playing devil's advocate here. Like Bryce Harper's a dude, don't get me wrong, but like that's what it took to kind of wake you up, right? Like you got the talent to be hitting 2 home runs a game, but it takes Arcia chirping you a little bit in the club. You know what I mean? Like that's the part. And I do think like if you want to give him a stare, that's fine, whatever. But I feel like the throat slashes are a little bit over the top. And again, it's like, that's what provokes you to just start crushing it, a little bit. Like, why isn't that your just everyday type approach, I guess is what I'm getting at.
By the way, isn't it crazy how like this is year 5 for Bryce Harper in Philadelphia, and before they made that run to the World Series last year, it was just like Bryce Harper was all but forgotten, really, after leaving the Nationals, and it's really just been these last couple of years getting into the playoffs and making some playoff drives where it's like, oh, hey, Bryce Harper, still a dude, he can still hurt you pretty bad. MVP type guy. So I think it's fun to kind of see him, back in the spotlight a little bit.
Yeah. And I think if I read something, he's only like 2 home runs away now from like the Phillies postseason home run record. He's only got like 2 more already. So that would be kind of cool if you could see him be, the Phillies postseason home run leader.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to wrap it up on that. A lot of good stuff on the whiteboard tonight. We've got other stuff, you and I and Vince, going on later tonight. So we're going to wrap things up with this. And don't forget, we've got IB Countdown to Kickoff coming up. The YouTube will go up Friday night, and the audio podcast drops Saturday morning to get you ready for Notre Dame and USC. Jess, great stuff. I will talk to you again soon.
Yes, go Irish, baby. USC week.
All right. We'll talk to everybody else as well. Hit the like button before you leave if you would. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.